violent pogroms in Eastern Europe. My identity as a Jew, like many Jews, is centered around the struggle for collective liberation. My paternal family name has origins in the Levant, in Lebanon, to be specific. It speaks to the deep ancestral origins of my Jewish people, who due to historic circumstances post-Holocaust, rule in Palestine today with an iron fist. And that is why I am here today, to share grief, horror, and solidarity with Palestinians under brutal genocidal siege in Gaza, to show solidarity with Palestinians facing ethnic cleansing at this very moment in besieged Rafah, and by Ben Gvir's ultra-nationalist religious settler lunatics in the West Bank, and with the community of Palestinian diaspora here on Lakwanian territory who have been displaced over 75 years of Zionist colonization of Palestinian land. I have utmost respect for the strength, the resiliency, and the steadfastness of the local Palestinian community to keep these rallies going for 18 consecutive weeks as you have endured losses of family members and loved ones and an entire society under the heinous, maniacal bombing and invasion of Gaza. As a Jewish person witnessing the unrelenting atrocities being perpetrated in the name of Jewish safety over the last 18 weeks, has buried my heart in pain, in rage, and shame. The remorseless state violence unleashed without end on your lands and people, on your women and children, on your schools, universities, and hospitals, on your homes and neighborhoods, on your professors and doctors, on your poets and journalists, on your dignity and safety and survival and your land in the false pretext of keeping Israelis safe, has laid bare not only the terrifying agenda of the fascist, religious, nationalist, settler, annexationists ruling in Israel today, not only the inherent racism of a society that is both educated and predicated on Jewish supremacy and which treats Palestinians in their own land as existential enemies, better dead than alive. When I lived in Israel, I was absolutely shocked by the in-your-face, blatant racism that exists every single day. It's in the daily discourse of people. One of the most common expressions in Israel is a good Arab is a dead Arab. This is what needs to change. Yes, we need a ceasefire. Yes, we need an end to Jewish military rule and occupation over Palestinian lives and lands. And yes, the entire structure of proprietary Zionism that posits and normalizes violent, exclusive Jewish domination over every inch of Palestine must be dismantled. In favor of a binational existence that upholds equal rights for the 7 million Palestinians and the 7 million Israelis who are not going away, and the people in the Palestinian diaspora who choose to return to ancestral lands where they are currently banned simply because they are Palestinian. You cannot keep some people safe by holding an entire society hostage and starving them with bombs raining down every day and night, and where no one is safe. The racist calculus of holding one people up while knocking another people down is the root of the problem.
That's right.
Never before in my life have I been so thoroughly disillusioned and disgusted with the Zionist dream of a Jewish ethno-state on Palestinian lands. The only just outcome I can see from the Nakba that unfolds to this day in Gaza is the dissolution of a Jewish state that ruthlessly dominates over every inch of Palestine, and where instead of occupation and apartheid, that holds millions of Palestinian people prisoners in their own land without the most basic human rights. Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs must coexist side by side in one shared land in mutual freedom, equality, and real democracy from the river to the sea.
Yes.
There can be no lasting peace without it. It may seem like a fantasy to some, but everything else to this day has been nothing but an unmitigated nightmare.
Yeah, that's right. You got it.
Let the Canadian government, everybody in government know we're not voting for any of them because none of them are speaking up about this. And I'm writing letters every day.
Exactly.
That's what I want to know. It's so obvious that they agree with this genocide, and I'm horrified to be a Canadian because of them. There's nothing but worms in the earth.
As an environmental and climate justice activist, I bear witness to the harmful legacy of environmental racism and destruction that results from the violent manifestations of settler colonialism from Coast Salish territories to Palestine. I bear witness to how land theft and the war that the state and capitalism wages on land-based people worldwide is inextricably tied to the degradation of both human and non-human habitats, biological diversity, water, and the very global ecological balances that indigenous peoples have stewarded sustainably for millennia and which sustain us all. The U.S.-Israel bombardment and ground war in Gaza has wrought unprecedented human suffering, colossal infrastructure damage, and environmental catastrophe that has rendered Gaza increasingly uninhabitable, as promised in the genocidal threats of several Israeli officials, used as evidence of crimes of genocide against Israel in the International Court of Justice. If the ICC ruling on provisional measures fell short of calling for a ceasefire, millions of citizens worldwide who know that nothing else can stop this genocide will not make the same mistake. It has always upset me how war, militarism, and the arms industry are all exempt and even kept secret in the accounting of the world's collective carbon footprint, which the consensus of global climate scientists are telling us must be reduced by 50% within just a few more years, or humanity cannot survive over the long term. Runaway climate change is defined by the UN as the greatest existential threat facing humanity. And in Gaza, the US and Israel has released more than the lethal carbon dioxide in the first 60 days of this so-called war than the total annual carbon emissions of 20 of the world's most vulnerable countries in terms of climate instability. Almost half of the total CO2 emissions during this so-called war were from U.S. cargo planes flying military supplies to Israel. In addition to the immediate human suffering in Gaza, this war is exacerbating the global climate emergency. It is estimated that the carbon cost of rebuilding Gaza is $150,000 damaged buildings, with contemporary construction materials will generate at least 30 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, or the equivalent of the total CO2 emissions of New Zealand in a year, and the higher annual emissions of more than 135 countries. That gives you an idea of the absolute catastrophic scale of destruction that has been wrought in the name of providing safety to Israeli citizens. Absolute criminal. Sorry, my phone just keeps skipping back to the beginning. Thank you. As such, this war is not only a genocidal assault on the people and the innocents of Gaza, it is an affront to international humanitarian law, but like all wars, is fueling the war on the whole planet and our collective future. The climate costs of war and militarism can no longer be hidden and ignored. It is estimated that humanity's true carbon footprint would be 5 to 8 times higher if emissions from the entire war supply chain were accounted for. The annual UN climate negotiations need to include the massive carbon pollution from war in their climate action plans, and to put an end to the environmental exceptionalism that allows militaries like the Israeli occupation forces to not only kill, but to pollute with impunity.
That's right.
As if carbon emissions spewing from their tanks and fighter jets just don't count. Better still, arms embargoes on countries like Israel that routinely violate international law with impunity must become the regular route of diplomacy. As it is all over the world, indigenous peoples' struggles to liberate their lands and traditional cultures from colonization are also at the forefront of protecting life's basic support systems that benefit us all. Supporting indigenous self-determination is what climate justice looks like. The climate consequences of rising sea levels, extreme prolonged drought and heat killing millions worldwide, have already been threatening water supplies and food security in Palestine. The environmental situation in Gaza is now dire, as carpet bombing has ravaged farmland, energy and water infrastructure, with devastating health implications for decades to come, as military detritus will continue to live in the soils, the marine environment, and the bodies of the people able to stay. For years now, precious water resources from Palestinian aquifer in the West Bank has been diverted from Palestinian subsistence farmers to swimming pools, lush landscaping, and industrial uses in illegal settlements. The once thriving Palestinian economy, which supplied an abundance of oranges, lemons, dates, and almonds and pistachios in the Great Fertile Crescent, has been supplanted by settler colonialism that has displaced and reduced traditional farmers and Bedouin herders to cheap and easily exploited day laborers working for Israeli businesses. The clearing of the beautiful ancient olive groves of Palestine, lovingly tended for generations and generations for real estate development, known otherwise as illegal settlements, is itself a crime against humanity as well. There is a better way forward from this dystopian nightmare we find ourselves in. The collective liberation of both Palestinians and Jewish Israelis depends on the joint struggle to overcome and permanently dismantle the structures of racial apartheid and military occupation that view Palestinians as a threat by very virtue of their existence in their own land.
Yes.
And which denies them the same freedom, sovereignty, and power that Israel has monopolized with an iron fist for far too long. Only true equality, mutual self-determination, and the fulfillment of the national aspirations of two peoples in one shared land can bring the peace and the security that has eluded both peoples for so long. From the river to the sea, freedom and equality.
Yes.